Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report. Wherever you get your podcast, you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. And don't forget, I will be back on, I think Tuesday, I'll probably do a little film review, mostly about looking at the big plays allowed, not just looking at the Bears game. Toss that one in the garbage can. No live stream Tuesday night at 7:30, none this week. And I'll have a couple more the rest of the week. Anyways, as you can see, if you're watching, I'm joined by my pal, Nicki Jhabvala of the Washington Post. And I appreciate it. Nicki, I don't know if you can tell that this is not a scratch and sniff. So I got some smoked turkey breast going right now. But really right now, all I smell is probably like coal. So not very pleasant sitting here by myself, not yet. It's after the turkey breast is smoked. And I know how much you love turkey breast. After the turkey breast is done smoking, then it's good.
I mean, I'm willing to decide if it's worth changing my mind if you want to bring in leftovers to the media room tomorrow. Just something to consider, you know?
I think we have a bad connection, so why don't we skip right to the questions? Anyway, turkey breast aside. And we're not going to sit here and revisit that Bears game because that was a debacle. However, there's a lot of questions that come out of that game. And we talked to Ron Rivera on Friday, and let's start with the first one because it was the first question that you asked was about staff changes. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants them. Team loses, there's an ugly loss and heads on a silver platter. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a wild guess and say you're not surprised that there were no staff changes.
I am not. I mean, for many reasons. I mean, I agree with him. It's only week 5. You fire somebody now. What does that say for the rest of the season? But also, you get rid of Jack Del Rio, say, because the defense has been not so great. Who's going to call the defensive plays? The only other defensive play callers are ones with experience anyway, or Ron and Juan Castillo, their run game coordinator. So I don't see either of them running the defense. If you make another change, like a positional coach, Brent Wieselmeyer's the secondary coach, is that going to fix what you want? Probably not. So I think in theory, a lot of these, it's like trades, in theory, it sounds smart to, trade this player, get rid of this coach. But there's always a second part of that deal, right? Who are you going to get instead? And right. I don't know that there's anybody better, or in some cases, anybody period that could replace some of the folks they might presumably get rid of.
Right. And, it's funny because you talked the other day, like I wanted to ask, why do you still have confidence in this group? However, I think we know the answer. I mean, first of all, what are you going to do at this point? Just like you said, so you're going to express the confidence and they can, if they want, they can fall back on last year where they start off horribly. it wasn't this bad though. That's the thing. And They were higher expectations this year. So it's not apples to apples. But they did have a really strong second half of the year. So I think you can if they want to, they can fall back on that aspect as well. Do you think?
Yeah. And I think the part that's most bothersome to me is the biggest issue is the defense. And this is right. The group that is loaded with talent and has for years kind of been sort of the crux of the team, really. They haven't been terribly consistent, but they've been more consistent than the offense, which has cycled through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback. So to see them kind of come unraveled is perplexing, because they do have talent in all, linebacker, maybe they have talent, but it's not to the level of the other right. spots, So they shouldn't be playing like this. And you feel like you're starting to see a little bit of what Sam Howell can do. So it kind of feels like a shame. So that's what's been most confounding, disappointing, all of the above with that group.
Right. And I agree with that. And by the way, one other thing, because the other thing that, and I don't know, part of me hesitates to even bring it up, but like you get people who saying they should fire Ron right away, right now. And I think the same answers would apply, like who then takes over. And for the Eric Bieniemy crowd, interim coaches don't get hired back typically.
Yeah.
So you're also putting him in a spot where it's his first time as a coordinator. Then now you ask him to be a head coach, first time as a full-time coordinator, and work with Sam Howell and try and get that group better. And that's where he can have the biggest impact. Right. And if he does a good job there and you like him after the season, you can get him there. But when you're putting him in a position where to be an interim head coach plus a coordinator and you're working with a young quarterback, it's not necessarily a recipe for success.
Right.
And,
Right.
and again, I think you can look back, if you're Josh Harris, we've heard all along, like they're going to give him the year. They want to give them the year. They want to judge them accordingly over the course of a season. I think it would be, and I think you can look back and say, okay, they bounced back before. Now, you bounce back to what this year? I don't know, but it is only 5 games, Nicki. And so, and I just kind of wanted to address that. Do you have any thoughts on that aspect?
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, that was the other part of it, along with Del Rio. You get rid of the play caller there, who you're going to put in, but I agree with you completely. Elevating the enemy, like, yeah, you would love to see him get his chance, but that's usually not it for coaches. And it would stretch him thin and frankly, put the offense at risk when you got a young quarterback. I don't think that's the answer either. I don't think that would make the improvement that people are looking for.
Right. And I think, again, if he does a good job and you want to keep him on after in his role and you want to elevate him, I think you're putting him in a better position to have success this year as to elevate from that particular role anyways. So that would be my thought there. Going back to the defense, the biggest surprise to me and has been the secondary and just the amount of big plays they've given up. Because Nicki, when we watch them in practice during the summer, like I kept thinking, I thought they were going to be a pretty good group.
Yeah, they looked good,
So,
and it was, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask you, what do you think has gone wrong there?
That's a part of it, because it's not just Emmanuel Forbes. He's had 2 really bad games. But the last one wasn't just him, everybody was getting beat. So was it lack of preparedness? I don't know what it was. Was it the play calling? It wasn't one thing solely, but it was clearly a mix of things, and it affected everybody. So why can't that group kind of get it together? I don't know, because a lot of those guys have played at least a year together. It's still a young group outside of Kendall Fuller, but they do have a season together in the system. That's been concerning. And I, honestly, when we were watching them in training camp and practice, they not only looked more polished, but they looked deeper too. They were rotating guys in and out, and you haven't seen that lately. I mean, up until I think through week 4, Percy Butler was the only reserve to step in. And then when they benched Forbes on Thursday, Danny Johnson came in, but they haven't used much of their depth at all.
No, that's surprising. And you know what's also surprising, because even the last game, and I'm a huge Kendall Fuller fan, because I think he's very smart, just a true pro, does the right things, tough player, does whatever you ask. He's going to be an all-pro? No, but he's been a good corner.
Right.
And on the one, he got beat on the double move the other day in the touchdown, but it was just a little technique hiccup where he looks back as the ball's in the air. I'm like, that's just like, you don't do that. And he knows, I'm sure if he's watching that, when he watched that, I'm sure he's like, what was I looking at? Because you can't look back in that situation. He looked back at the quarterback, then he loses sight of what is it. You want to play through the ball and all that. And it just made it difficult. And so those are some of the things that have been happening where it's like, I don't get it. Like Percy Butler on the 1 touchdown, he's looking completely inside. You're a deep half safety. You don't do that. Those seem to be like, that's where it's a confounding, Nicki, is that, those are little mistakes that shouldn't be made. And, I know do you think Chris Harris was that big of a loss, or is this just like guys just trying, seeing the wrong things? Because those are 101. Those aren't like, that's not Chris Harris telling you to do this. Every coach at any level in those situations will tell you the same thing.
Right. And these aren't rookies that are doing this, I don't think they need Wieselmeyer to tell them not to do this. And it's frankly not on Wieselmeyer to tell them not to do that. That's part of, they should know that. So I felt like it was one of those days where everybody just had a bad game. And usually you get those hiccups and it's just one person makes a mistake and it's glaring and you move on. But this is, everybody made many of the same mistakes.
Where do you think this team goes from here, Nicki? Do you look at that and say like that's a bad game or a really bad sign?
I mean, the Forbes thing concerns me because that's 2 bad games in a row. And it's not just getting beaten coverage; it's the technique with his tackling. I I think, at least for me, I don't want to speak for others, but I think for me, I felt like he'd be more plug and play coming in. He's still young. He's still going to have some hiccups, but he was an immediate starter, and he was going to get time, and he'd learn as he went, not like this. So where do you go from there with him is my biggest question. I mean,
I was going to ask you that too.
You can't cut him off now after only 4 games. You got to give him more chances. He's a first round pick. It's guaranteed for 4 years. So you got to make something work, and you got to help him develop. But how do you balance that with, the performance of the rest of the team? How do you make it so he's not a detriment to the rest of the defense? And that's that. I don't know how they do that. I mean, I guess you start him again, see how he does. And, if he has one mistake, bench him and use your depth more, I guess. But that's the concern there.
Yeah, that's a big concern, especially because you're getting nothing from that class.
Nothing.
After
right now they're a liability. They're not even a value add. They're a liability with the mistakes Forbes are making, because I think outside of Forbes, the rest of the rookies, including undrafted receiver Mitchell Tinsley, have played 13 offensive and defensive snaps this season. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I get some of it is circumstance. Their starters have been relatively healthy. You're not going to bench one of the starters to put in one of these guys, but the person, it's like the pieces don't fit the holes, right? Like the personnel doesn't really match what they needed, doesn't match what they need now. And for the future, if these guys don't get any time, what good are they to the team? So it's a real problem. I may or may not have written about it for tomorrow's paper in the Washington Post, but
there you go. Monday's paper. This will come out Monday. So today's paper, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but going back to Forbes too, because one of the things when we were up in Baltimore for those 2-day scrimmages, he had his ups and downs, and he got, some of the stuff that he's been beat on, he was beat on up there. Yeah. And, and we brought it up to Rivera the other day about because they say, well, how do you learn from last week? Well, does it concern you? Because some of these issues were there in Baltimore. Now they point out the good plays he made, which is fine. It's kind of like me. If I go to the driving range and I hit 5 good shots, if I go on the course and those 5 bad ones follow me to the course, but I'm going to tell someone, well, on the range, I hit all these good shots. Well, 5 of them were good. The 5 that you sucked at followed you. And that's right. And so so some of the things that he did wrong has been following him since then. Yeah. And that's where it's like, is he going to learn from that as well? And maybe sometimes you just need to go through this for a guy who's that aggressive to see what you can do, But
and that's one instance where I would maybe look at the coaching. He had these issues in training camp. How have you developed him? How have you helped him work through those? Because it's one thing to see it, but if you don't do anything about it, what's the point? So that one hurts. You don't want to write off Emmanuel Forbes completely. He's a first round pick. I think can be a quality player, no doubt. He's not the first round rookie to get benched or deal with struggles, but this is a group that needs immediate help at that position now, and the mistakes are killing them.
Yeah, and I think I still the kid has talent. There's no doubt about that, and I just think he needs to understand a little bit how to play in the NFL, or what he needs to do to succeed in the NFL. But he has talent. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I think he can still be a playmaker at this level. The one thing I wonder too, is the weight a bigger issue than maybe you thought it might be?
Yeah. I mean, it certainly has crossed my mind.
Like I said, not just the weight, but the frame, the frame.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, it, again, I know you mentioned this, the team made the reference to his play in the SEC, how that's the closest thing to the NFL. And that really meant a lot to them as they were scouting him. He had plenty of experience in the SEC. He looked good in the SEC. Fine. But the NFL is still a different level. Guys are bigger. They're men. So yeah, I do think it is still a concern, and it showed up as still a concern. He's shown flashes of being able to tackle and make the hard hits, but then other times he looks completely hesitant. You don't know if that's because he knows he's right, not smaller, but he doesn't have the strength maybe of the guys he's going up against. So he kind of shies away from it. That's what it looks like from afar. I don't know that that's truly reality, but that's how it looks. So that's when it crosses my mind where it's like, oh, is this still a problem? Or like even times when he's in, man coverage and he gets pushed back like a good 5 yards. Like
that's what I was going to look at. Yeah. That to me is where it shows up as much as anything, because, in the run game, he's made some tackles, and then you said there's sometimes he's not getting involved as much. But it was some of those plays the other night was the separation created at the top of routes. And sometimes I'm looking at it as like, is that a push off, or are they not giving him the benefit of the doubt because he's so thin that they figure maybe there's not much of a push there? I don't know, but some of them are like, arms extended, and you're seeing like, I don't know, but I know there's hand fighting going on, so they're going to allow that. But is it, but at the top of the routes is where he's going to have to adjust to that. Can you do that? And I'm sure there are ways you can do it, because there've been other corners who are 175 pounds or small, right? They're not big
Martin
guys.
Small,
Fred Smoot tells me all the time how skinny.
Yeah.
Smoot. I mean, I covered Smoot. Smoot was he got bigger, but he was not a big corner. And so he survived. So I think there's some ways that he just has to figure it out. And, do you worry about him? We've gotten to know him a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know him great. We know him a little bit. Worry about his confidence. He seems okay.
Yes, very much. I mean, he's a rookie. He's human. Last I checked. So yes, I mean, especially with, the first game against a divisional rival, it's a huge game. Second game, prime time, everybody's watching. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all of these guys have a healthy confidence. I think you have to play at this level. But at some point, like anybody that can take a hit, when you go through things like this, you worry about it with any young player, be it a quarterback or a cornerback. So yeah, I worry about it. I'm sure there's frustration, there's anger of the whole bit. So yeah, I hope for his sake, he continues to get chances so he can work through that. And this is not sort of the mark that's left in his mind,
Yeah, and I'm sure he will. And that's, he needs a few games to kind of just not have a lot of bad plays and just kind of build on that. Funny thing is, like Danny Johnson, Danny Johnson does a nice job in reserve. He also got beat on a double move. The ball was just too long. And so like all these guys are getting beat on those double moves. And I think Justin Fields talked about it after the game. He also talked about how they were playing a lot more man. And so like they feasted on that. And because of those double moves, and I think they play on their, I do you wonder, and this came up in the press conference the other day about the emphasis on turnovers. What is there? I think it's hard because sometimes in those cases, they are being aggressive. Do you think that plays with their mind a little bit and makes them a little bit more aggressive, or is that just because
we don't know if they're emphasizing that more to us or more to them, that's one thing. And then, it's not like that hasn't been emphasized before. I mean, they're DBs. That is the emphasis of their position, so I don't necessarily believe that. I do think that what some of the Bills players were saying, or actually it was Tevin Jenkins with the Bears, saying you noticed that some of the rotations were sort of weak or lazy. I do think there's some truth to that. Like if they're being lax with some of their technique, then other teams are gonna pick up on this, with the rotations too. So I think that is a real thing. But as far as the turnovers, I mean, they go out there hoping to get turnovers. That is their whole emphasis the whole time, Yeah,
and I think sometimes with these big plays, it's as much where are your eyes, because like Kendall Fuller again on the double move, he's like he gets beat because of technique, not because he's what I mean. And he just made a mistake that the guy typically does not make, and it cost him. And so and that it's happened. Benjamin St. Juice, the little sail route in and out. And, he thought he was coming inside. And so he was aggressive, but I don't know that he's looking for turnover as much as he's trying to take a pass away. So who knows?
And I think like maybe Forbes, because his whole career is predicated on the pick sixes and the pass deflections. He might have a tendency to always try to go for that bigger play, which is something, I mean, you see it in quarterbacks too, young quarterbacks where they're just always trying to get the big play. That may be a thing, but I don't know that that's because of how much the team has emphasized takeaways this
Right.
year.
I think you're right. I think that is his mindset. And so, yeah. And that's, has Chase Young been a bright spot, or what do you think lately? What do you
I
think?
thought he played well last game. I thought he was one of the few that
Right.
had
Right.
a decent game. I mean, he was all over the place. I think there have been moments where he could have been better or done a little bit more, but generally speaking, I thought he was the most effective guy on the line
By far. And it was by, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is good to see. I mean, it shows you, that's why Chase Young is Chase Young, the things he can do up front. I mean, that group still, they have not consistently played well together since 2020. And I still think 2020 was a bit of an illusion of sorts because they didn't have the toughest schedule and it wasn't, so I don't know why it's still taken this long to get that group of first rounders to really play as dominant as probably they should be,
And they certainly have games where they're like that. And then others where, and I also think, it's funny because one of the things teams do against these guys, a lot of six-man protections that Washington does not do a lot of. It's not a big part of this offense. I think they have more by far entering Sunday by far more. And I know they played an extra game, so I'll be curious to see what it is after, Monday morning or to this morning, but by far more 5-man protections than anybody else in the NFL. And so, I think teams do against them, and then they're counting on guys breaking down, it seems, right? And they've shown that. And, and so that's been an issue. And it's confounding, Nicki. I'm shocked. Like, if you had told me the defense would start slow, I'm like, oh, okay, but what happened the other night and the last couple, the big plays against Philly outside, you don't take Forbes' plays away, but the rest of the group did a good job against DeAndre Swift, right?
Yes.
And they held, you take some of those plays away, which you can't. But the point is, it wasn't as a unit. The Bears game was a complete meltdown of the entire unit. Right. And that's where it's like, okay, going forward, do you have confidence that they can turn it around on that side of the ball?
I'd have to see a game where they really do turn it around, frankly. That's concerning, a game like that,
Yeah.
Because I don't know where you begin, really. Issues in all three phases. We haven't even talked about the linebackers, but my goodness, they got torched. For the longest time, I feel like we've just kind of ignored the linebackers and hoping the other positions would compensate. But geez, we're getting past the second level quick.
And the funny thing is, even because Jamin's actually had a decent year.
He's been decent.
Yeah, he's been solid.
Yeah.
Cody Barton thinks a lot out there, and he's going to be slow a lot of times because he's reacting slower, I think, because he thinks a lot out there and thinks too much. But because you're expecting the line to be dominant, and the secondary is giving up all these big plays, that the linebacker plays kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, and and it hasn't. It hasn't been great, but like I said, Jamin has played faster this year, and Cody Barton has not. And so that's where the state of the linebackers at. But the issues, I think you can live with that group if the front is playing consistently the way they expect to, and if the secondary is not giving up the big plays. But if you, I don't know, they need better play there, which in general, right? In general. Right. But looking at the offense, and but again, they give up too many big pass plays, and that's on the secondary. And it's not like the linebackers are. Jamin has been much better in coverage. But again, if the other groups are playing well, I think there'd be a little bit more focus on those two. But that's at least. What do you think of that?
Am
I wrong? Okay,
I agree.
So let's go to the offense for a couple minutes and then wrap it up. But Sam Howell, 5 games, about what you thought? Or better?
Yeah, honestly, better than I thought. He's had some not so great moments, but I just love how he bounces back from them. He's gonna show the mistakes that probably anybody would, and 5 games in. But he doesn't let that snowball week to week. often he doesn't let it snowball quarter to quarter. He's still able to stay in there, make those tough throws, keep his poise, which I think is, you don't see it on the stat sheet, but I think it's imperative for a young quarterback. So I still think he has a ton of potential. I honestly, he's been sort of the silver lining to all of this, is the defense may be imploding, but you may have found something in Sam Howell. So I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised by him. You hope he continues to grow and just progress.
What about, the level of concern on the amount of hits?
Yeah, I mean,
regardless of who's at fault,
yeah.
it's a ton.
Yeah, I mean, I won't seek Charles Leno's input, but yeah, no, that's a lot of hits. He's endured it, he's withstood it and stayed in there, but like, it's only week 5 and he's had almost 30 sacks, that doesn't include all the other hits that,
Well, listen, at the end of that, he had that one run the other night, his 3rd and 10, and he's trying to truck people. Now I remember at the end of that play, like Chase Young runs down to the side to help pick him up off the ground, because you see your quarterback fighting for that, because he knows how important it is to try and get that first down in that situation. But it's a linebacker. He runs with the linebacker's mentality. And it's really, it's funny because it's both admirable, and then it's like, oh, Sam.
Oh, I know. It's a little bit of that. It's like Taylor Heineke. That was the biggest part. That was part of his charm, really, was he was willing to put it all out there. And at some point it becomes just reckless abandon instead of aggressiveness. And that's the line he's going to have to figure out. But I think part of it too is just having, more awareness in the pocket, which I think he'll figure out. I mean, he's been pretty good about learning from experience and kind of not making a lot of the same mistakes twice. That doesn't mean he won't have 5 sack games, but like, I think he'll figure that out. He's a smart player. I still think he needs better protection up front. A lot of the sacks are on him, but I still think he needs better protection up front.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's what I was going to say is, I think he can figure it out. I think he's a smart kid. And I always kind of focus more on him because he's the one between the line and Sam Howell. Howell has the bigger, the more room for improvement to get better. I just think that group is going to be what they are. So a lot of it hinges on Howell being able to adjust on the fly behind this group. And I think, going forward for next year, you have to build, if they come back, if they don't come back, you have to build a stronger wall. If he's your guy, you've got to give him a little bit more, because he can do some good things if you give him a little bit more time. And it is a little bit extra, right? It's a little bit extra, but you got to get people who can give him that, because that is this is what he is. And we've heard for many years or few years about protecting the quarterback and building that line. And it's like, they did not give him the line that he needed.
Yeah. They gave him, this is probably the worst line they've had during Rivera's tenure. I still don't understand why so many, every day man's have a finite amount of money to spend. I get it, cap, salary cap, everything. But for so many teams, the priority is never the offensive line. They'll say it is, but it really isn't based on their actions. I mean, they'll try to go cheap with, some of the talent they bring in, and there's a correlation between, the amount you spend and usually the amount you spend and the product you get. And you can see that this year. I mean, and they're going to have some tough decisions they made, because they gave Andrew Wiley quite a bit of money, and Nick Gates, he's got enough money to where you're going to have to really think about a cap hit next year if you want to move on, that type of thing. So, I mean, the only one that's up for free agency is Sadiq Charles next year. So,
and he's actually been fine.
Right. And you got 2 guys you drafted who don't look all that close to being ready for something like that. So they put themselves in a tough spot.
They did. And I think that's one where, and you're right, there's some lines, and a lot of times the quarterback can make the line. And we've seen some really high level quarterback play where you make the line look better. Yeah. But then if you have a young quarterback, the line has to help him look better and give him the little bit more time, whether it's asking too much. And yes, we all know he needs to improve. with the awareness, with a little bit more of the timing. I mean, shoot, even on the Jahan, I was watching the Jahan Dotson throw before the missed field goal, that drive right before the missed field goal. There was one where Dotson's open to this corner and he just delays on the throw. And so
Right.
but that's one where okay, as you see it more, we know the guy can make it and he can
Right.
usually make it a little bit quicker, but that's something he can learn.
Right.
But you've got to be able to protect him. And the other part is too, on some of these overloads and all that, they're getting killed on those.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Where is that stemming from? There were a couple where he just didn't see them, and I'm not blaming him. I don't know who is at fault on those. But the bottom line is guys are free and nobody knows they're coming.
So
and
many times there's been a free rusher, and I'm
that's
just
a problem.
Yeah. And teams are seeing it work, so why not keep doing it?
Chicago doesn't blitz, and they blitzed the hell out of them the other night.
I know.
So
because why wouldn't you after seeing that? It worked.
If I'm Atlanta, if I'm the Giants, Wink, Wink Martindale's going to blitz about 500 times in that game.
Yeah.
And so, but anyways, last thing
Strowman
here,
looked like an all-pro cornerback.
I know. How about that? But, going forward now, again, starting this week, is there anything you're going to look for out of this group this week in practice to tell you anything about how they were coming back from these games?
I mean, I'd like to see a little bit more urgency. I know that's kind of cliche, but there's only so much you can glean from that and how it'll translate to the field. But it did feel like over the last week, it's been kind of dull just in their demeanor. But, it's hard to see in the 15 minutes that we get of practice. But that'd be one thing. And I figuring out ways to clean up that defense, because
we're not going to see that till Sunday.
I know. And that's, they were good, 4 weeks ago. So, they're capable of it. They got to get back to that somehow.
There you go. Nicki, I appreciate your time as always, and tell people where they can check you out.
At WashingtonPost.com or on X at Nicki Jhabvala, NICKIJHABVALA.
I was going to say, what the hell is X? I still get confused by that.
Weird.
What is that? So anyway, Nicki, always appreciate it. Check her out and check her workout and give her a read, give her a follow. Thanks a lot, Nicki.
Of course.